I used to be one of those girls who's all about Valentine's Day, but it's hard to keep that same energy nowadays, especially after what happened on Valentine's Day back in 2016. It actually started a few days before when I was on my way out of my apartment to go to work. As I walked out of my door, I noticed that there was a small piece of paper pinned to it. There was a small note scribbled on the paper. It said, "Missed connection. Saw you at Price Chopper and was too scared to ask for your number." Then at the bottom of the note was a phone number that I assumed they wanted me to call. I thought it was really sweet at first, but as the day went on, I kept getting more and more creeped out as I thought about some stranger knowing where I live. I talked to one of my coworkers about it, and they agreed that whoever it was must have followed me home from the grocery store, which is crazy. I made sure to tell my family about it so that they knew I was safe and could check in on me if they wanted. But other than that, there wasn't much I could do. The next morning, 2 days before Valentine's Day, I did the same thing. I walked out of my apartment to head to work and was surprised to see another note on the door. This time, all it said was, "Oh, so you're one of those girls." I looked around to see if there was any sign of where it came from, but I was in a rush to get to work and couldn't look around that much. That day on my lunch break, I called the company that owns and manages the apartment complex I lived at and told them what was happening. They reassured me that they would have security and maintenance double-check that all gates were closed and locked until the situation was sorted out. But I still couldn't shake this unsafe feeling, and now it was following me everywhere I went. I kept looking around on my rides to and from work, wondering if any of the cars behind me were the person who had been following me. The next day I was thankful in the morning because there wasn't any sign of a note on my door. Because I felt so relieved, I was able to go most of my workday without worrying about the person stalking me. That was until I got home. As I walked from my car to the front door of my apartment, I could see that there was something on the door. I grabbed it right away, but was hesitant to flip it over and read it. I opened my door and got into my apartment as fast as I could before feeling comfortable enough to check it out. And after seeing what it said, I called my mom immediately and asked if one of them would stay in my apartment with me. When I told her that the note said, "Watch your back," she didn't hesitate to make my older brother spend a few nights with me. He stayed in the guest room, and the first night that he was there, we had no sign of trouble. The next day was Valentine's Day, though, and we agreed that he could go on his date with his girlfriend, but they would both spend the night in my apartment so I wasn't alone overnight. I didn't have any plans that day, so I just went straight home after work. It started out as a quiet night as I put on some TV and ate some takeout that I had ordered. As I was getting ready to get into the shower, though, I heard a noise that made me freeze in place. There was a distinct creaking noise that came from the front of my apartment, and I immediately recognized it as my front door. I called out hoping that this was my brother and his girlfriend, but there was no answer. All I heard was the sound of the door slamming closed, followed by footsteps quickly moving through my home. I made sure that the bathroom door was locked and then looked around frantically as the sound of the footsteps got closer and closer. I screamed as loud as I could as the person made their way up to the bathroom door and tried to turn the handle. When it wouldn't open, though, he tried forcing the door off the hinges by kicking it and throwing his shoulder into it. Thankfully, it didn't budge. I looked around and couldn't help but start to cry from fear as I realized that my phone was in the other room on a charger. I couldn't even call for help if I wanted to. That's why I was lucky that my brother and his girlfriend got home when they did. They used his key to enter the apartment just a few minutes after the man had broken in, and when he heard me crying for help, my brother told his girlfriend to call the cops and then rushed to tackle the man. Once the cops got there, I came out of the bathroom and got a good look at the man and didn't recognize him at all. But when I said that, he just got more upset and started yelling about how I was a monster. The police found a small knife on him and a pair of zip ties, and they suspected that if my brother hadn't gotten to my apartment, he was going to do some horrible things. I moved out of that place shortly after and lived with my parents for a few months before getting a trustworthy roommate. But yeah, ever since then, Valentine's Day is not for me. One of the worst dates I ever had was on Valentine's Day, and it wasn't because the date itself went bad. You see, this was back when I was in middle school and just started dating this girl in my class. We were going out for 2 months, and at that point, I decided to take her to the movies and then get her some food at the mall for our first Valentine's Day together. I was so excited about it, and she seemed like she was too. But one thing that I didn't account for that day was that stranger danger is a real thing. That day, my mom and I picked up my girlfriend from her house, and she drove us to the mall before dropping us off and agreeing to meet us outside of the theater an hour after the movie let out. That way, we had time to get some food. We both went inside, and I picked up the tickets before asking her if she wanted to get some popcorn, but I could tell that she wasn't really paying attention. I asked if something was wrong, and that was when she told me not to be obvious about it, but she was pretty sure that 2 older guys were looking at her. I tried to make it seem like I was just looking at her, but I looked over her shoulder, and sure enough, I could see 2 guys dressed in plaid shirts and camo pants, just looking right at us. I tried to tell her that it was nothing to worry about, and we went into the movie hoping not to have to worry about that again. As I hoped, by the time we got out of the movie, the 2 men seemed like they were long gone, and the 2 of us happily made our way to the upper section of the mall for the food court. We decided to get some pizza from the pizza place and then a Frosty from Wendy's. But as I was walking back to the table, I noticed that those 2 guys that we saw before were sitting in a booth near the window. It didn't look like they were staring at us this time though, so I didn't want to say anything. We both sat down at our table across the food court from them and then started to enjoy our meal. About halfway through my pizza though, I felt a hand land on my shoulder and heard my girlfriend gasp. I looked up and the 2 men were standing over me. One of them had a creepy-looking lazy eye, and the other had a mouth full of messed up teeth. Everything about them told me that I shouldn't cause any problems with them. But it turned out they weren't there for any friendly reason. After I looked up at the man who had his hand on my shoulder, he very calmly told me and my date to get up and walk with them. Before I could even start to protest, he said, "Don't get too loud. I have a gun on you," and then gestured for me to look down at his waistband, where he lifted his shirt just enough to show off some sort of handgun. Me and my girlfriend got up and the 2 men started ushering us out of the food court and towards the doors. I looked over at my date and she had the same look of terror that I did, but we both knew that we couldn't let them take us out of the mall. We walked past the staircase that we used to walk up to the 2nd floor of the mall, and I don't know what came over me. I grabbed my girlfriend's arm, pulled her away from the 2 men, and started running down the stairs. All I could think was that if we could make it around a corner, they couldn't shoot at us. But as I looked back at them, I could see that they were chasing after us. The crowd of people in the mall wasn't deterring them at all by that point, and all we could do was hope that we were faster than them. We made it down the 1st floor and started running toward the movie theater as I heard my phone start to ring. It was my mom, and when I answered, she asked if I was ready to be picked up and said that she was waiting in the parking lot. That was it, our escape. I knew that if we can make it to my mom's car, we would be able to get away from the 2 men. Me and my girlfriend ran as fast as we could out the large doors leading into the mall and toward my mom's car, which was parked right across from the entrance. We hopped into the car as fast as we could and told my mom to drive. She didn't hesitate to pull out of the parking lot before asking what we were running from, and when I explained what happened, she was very proud of us for getting to her safely. We dropped my girlfriend off at her house and spoke to her parents about what happened, and then both of our families filed a police report. That was hands down the scariest date I ever had, and the fact that it was on Valentine's Day only made it worse. Last Valentine's Day, I went out with a few friends from work for a single ladies' night that one of the restaurants and bars in town was hosting. It started out as a lot of fun. Me and my friends just had some appetizers and drank a bit while listening to some music. There weren't a lot of men hanging around that night, but I did notice one who kept looking over at my friend Jessica. I kept telling her that she should go up to him and say hi, but I'm glad she didn't listen to me because he turned out to be my worst nightmare. We spent a few hours at the bar before calling it a night. I stopped drinking about 2 hours before I felt completely sober and safe to drive. But as I said bye to my friends and walked to my car, I realized that I wasn't the problem. I made my way out of the bar, and as I was walking toward my car, I heard the door to the bar open behind me. I thought it might be someone saying that I forgot something because I used to do that all the time. But when I turned around, I realized that it was the same guy that I caught staring at us. I didn't think anything of it and kept walking to my car. But when I got to the driver's side door, though, I looked in the reflection of the glass and saw that he was walking up right behind me. I turned around to tell him that I wasn't interested and really just wanted to get home. But before I could say anything, I felt a big hand grab the side of my face before pushing it down and smacking it into the side of my car. I don't remember what happened after that. The next thing I knew, I was waking up inside the trunk of a car that was driving down the road. As I realized that I had been attacked and abducted, I started to scream. I felt around with my hands to see if I could find anything that I could use to save myself. But from what I could tell, the trunk was completely empty. I started to freak out for a minute as we continued to drive down the road. Every bump that we hit made me bounce and almost hit the top of the trunk, which at first was annoying, but in the end it actually saved my life. I was laying in that trunk for what felt like forever, but was really only a couple of minutes before the car made a distinct turn that caused me to slide a bit in the trunk. We kept driving straight for a little bit before hitting what I assumed was a very large pothole, and to my surprise, the second the car's back wheels hit the hole, the trunk's latch popped open. My eyes had to adjust to the brightness of the streetlights, but once they did, I could see that there was a car driving behind us just a little bit down the road. I figured if I could flag them down, they could help me. The only problem was, the man who attacked me realized that the trunk was open and had started slowing down so that he could pull over. I couldn't wait for that to happen, so I decided to just go for it. I leaned out of the trunk of the car and did my best to jump out of it and protect my face as I fell onto the pavement. Once I was on the ground, I got up as fast as I could and started running toward the headlights that were down the road and screaming for help. I heard the sound of the car that I was in coming to a stop, but it was too late for him. Once the car that I had spotted noticed me, they came to a quick stop and thankfully believed that I was in danger and let me into their car. They quickly turned around and started driving in the opposite direction in case the man decided to chase us. But it seemed like he just kept driving after he noticed that I was safe in someone else's car. The person who picked me up was kind enough to drive me to the police station where I reported the incident. They told me that they would have to follow up with the bar that I was attacked at and hoped that they had security cameras outside. Other than that, there wasn't much they could do based on what I told them, other than get a description from me of what the man looked like. That was hands down a Valentine's Day that I will never forget.